Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. What I'm going to show you today is how I'm going to go about painting the 92nd Cadian regiment, and they are very cool, but I'll give you a warning, which isn't something I ordinarily start these videos with, that this fella is a little more involved than some of the other Imperial Guard schemes I will have done. They aren't difficult, they're just time consuming. So if you're interested, or you can find another way of doing this a little bit quicker, I would love, please link it in the description because I like how these guys look. But it is a little bit of a slow process with them. All the same, all of the paints will be listed in the description below today, and I'm going to do that cool thing where I show you the battle ready and then we'll take it a little bit further. So let's get started. So once you've got your Cadian assembled and all ready to go, the first thing to do, of course, is prime him. Now here I've used Wraithbone. You could also use White Scar if you want a slightly lighter finish overall, but Wraithbone I think is going to give a little bit of warmth to some of the colors we're going to use that will be quite nice. Particularly because we're going to be using quite a few contrast colors, it's going to make that a great deal easier, but the white is also perfectly acceptable if that's what you've got. Now, just like painting with regular acrylics, I tend to find that even with contrast, it's easiest to start from the lowest layer and work your way up. So on our fella, that's going to be his skin, and we'll do a little dab of Guilliman flesh in here to give him a bit of color. Now that doesn't take very much work, and it's brilliant once it's finished. Guilliman flesh is just magic. What we're going to do now is actually to paint in his armor, of all things, and we're going to start by painting the stripe rather than the green, because I tend to find it easier to start with the lighter color and then straighten up using the darker color of the armor. So what I've got here, this is Tau Light Ochre, but I have seen people use all sorts of different colors for this. Deathclaw Brown or Bestigor Flesh will both work as well. I tend to find it easiest flipping them upside down and trying to paint a relatively straight line like so. Now, like I said, don't worry too much if it isn't perfectly straight or if it bulges a little to either side. We're just laying down a base coat here. Now that's going to be a little tricky the first few times you do it. I've had a lot of practice, my lines are generally pretty straight. It's going to do you no good to say, I can't paint straight lines. If you want to do Cadian 92nd, you're going to get so much practice. But if you do have troubles with it, that's what the next stage is for. I've got Elysian green here, and this is going to be the base for the armor. But what we'll do as well is to start close to our lines and slowly straighten them up with a bit of this green. And once you're satisfied with that, you can start painting in the armor around it. Now, this is quite a thin green, so you'll probably find it's going to need 2 coats over most of the armor. So areas like in behind his las gun here, and his knee pads as well. Let's green that armor. Now once you've got that green down, the Tau Light Ochre is going to look a lot more orange by comparison, so bonus. Now that's a little bit tricky because honestly once you've laid down the first coat it's going to be a little bit streaky. Make sure that you do let each panel dry thoroughly before going back and painting another layer. Now what I'm going to do next is actually to shade both the armor and the jacket itself. And for this, I'm going to use the Army Painter's Soft Tone. You could use Seraphim Sepia if that's what you've got access to. I'm just not a big fan of the new formulation of the shades. They're too gloopy for me. But we can fix that with a little bit of Lamian Medium if you want. But what I'll do is 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of the good stuff, and then just 1 drop of water, just to break up the surface tension a little and help this flow. And you'll see this is a slightly more brown tone than the much more yellow new Sepia from Citadel, so that's why I'm using this. What we'll do is start applying this over all of the armor and also his clothing. So the jacket, which has got that little bit of yellow tint to it, we're going to go over that as well. So take your time here, you don't want to let it pool too heavily. Now once you've applied this, you're going to want to leave it for a little while to dry, maybe 20 or 30 minutes or so. And yeah, this is pretty much the green done. Now as well, over the clothing, you'll see we get a nice quick pale bone color to the gear that we don't really have to highlight if we don't want to later. But take your time, give a quick coat of this all over the green and his uniform. You'll see I've been quite careful in my application there. Anywhere that you do want to go back and get slightly deeper shading, you can go in with another coat of this stuff once it's dried, and you'll see it's just the right color. You could try thinning out a little bit of Skeleton Horde to contrast if you wanted to, but I think the shade works a little better because it also works to shade our green. Now, a quick one that we have got to fix up here is that the yellow, or rather the orange stripe, is now a little bit darker than I would like. So what we'll do is go back with our Tau Light Ochre. And don't worry if you can't get this perfectly straight, you just want to brighten up most of the center of the stripes. Anywhere that there's a little bit of shading, which you do want to keep, well, just don't paint it. Now to paint in his trousers, we're going to turn back to contrast. I have here Dark Angel's green. Now, you might ask why I've painted the stripe on his armor before doing the trousers. And the simple answer is, I tend to like the look of these guys without the stripe on the trousers. I've also seen plenty of folks paint them this way. So I'm not much fussed about that little bit of extra orange, to be honest. But take your time around here. Try to avoid any bits that you have already painted. Dark Angel's green's kind of a funny one. It'll look a little bit vile going on, if I'm honest, but as it dries, it comes out quite nice. We'll add some rattling grime now to another couple of parts of his uniform. His gaiters, first of all, we can very quickly splatter those. And also the little thing on his pack here, I'm going to paint this in with rattling grime. You'll see as well, I've also painted in the little wraps on his rifle with this. Because it's going to be black, I should probably have chosen a different color, but yeah, you can do that when you paint yours. We're going to paint now Black Legion, and you could also instead here use Abaddon Black if you want to use traditional acrylic. All of the black details, well, let's black them in. Now, particularly on the pack here, you're going to make sure that you're getting into the recesses and that you're not missing any of the little nooks and crannies, because they will glow if you miss them. And the thing with contrast too is that it will dry fairly quickly on your brush. So once you've put in a section like this, like once I've finished this pack, I'm going to rinse my brush off and then apply some fresh stuff from the pot. You don't want to keep working with it for too long, otherwise it will ruin your brushes. And yeah, all of the black stuff, his pouches, water bottle, all this with some Black Legion now. Now it looks like we're finally getting somewhere. Black Legion can be a little bit finicky, but when you're applying it, keep your brush moving in the same direction on these bigger areas, and that'll help reduce any sign of brush strokes. Move now to Iron Hand Steel, and no great surprise, let's go ahead and paint in some of the steel bits. Any metal that you want to base coat now, most of it's going to be silver. As a matter of fact, I think on these guys, all of it's going to be silver. Once you've got all of the silver parts applied, you can also tap in the little buttons on his jacket if you fancy, but you don't necessarily need to. I just think it looks cool when you do. I've now got a little bit of Corax white, and I'm going to paint in the, funnily enough, little white Aquillas. Now some folks have a bit of trouble with Corax white. I always recommend put a little bit of Lamian medium in the pot when you first open it, and pop an agitator in there too, and that'll help keep it nice and smooth for when you need it. Otherwise, a couple of coats of Ulthuan Grey will do the job here. It'll just look a little bit more blue. Now at last, once that's finished, go ahead and shake yourself up some Nuln Oil. I'm using the old stuff because it's what I've got, and Nuln Oil is honestly probably the one that I think is a little bit better with the new formulation. So I'll tell you that. What we're going to do is go over all of the black, the metal, the rattling grime, and we're also going to go over the Dark Angel's green with this too. I'm going to use a medium layer brush for most of it because I want quite a bit of control over where this goes. I don't want to get his hands, for example. But yeah, at this point, cover over all the metallic stuff. And I am also going to get a smaller brush. Or can I just do it with this? Yeah, we'll do it with this. We'll do the white as well. Now with that dry, our fella is finished, basically. We can go ahead and pop them on the table. You're going to have an awful lot of guardsmen to paint, so getting to this sort of level and then putting them on the table, they will look fine like this. But we can take it a little bit further. I am going to go ahead and base him now, just so you can see what he looks like with all of his guff together. This is a bit of Armageddon Dust, and I'll put the rest of the recipe for this in the description. It's nice and simple. And then we'll carry on and we'll do some highlighting to make them look a little bit nicer. And there we have it. Even with a very simple base, that Guardsman looks a whole lot better. And yeah, chuck a bunch of him on the table, you'll be fine. But say you do want to take it a little bit further. You want a nicer finish, maybe on your commanders, or you've just got a bit of time and you fancy a really nice looking army. Well, a couple of highlights won't go amiss. So I've got here Krieg Khaki, and this one has a funny little greenish tint to it. You'll see I've got just a tiny amount on my brush. What I'm going to do is use this to highlight some of the edges of the armor. You don't need to go crazy with this. You can be quite sparing, a little will go a long way. But as much of this as you want to highlight, away you go. Now if you want to highlight his jacket, what I'm going to turn to here, this is Pallid Witch Flesh. Screaming Skull, ironically enough, is not actually light enough. You could even turn here to white if you wanted to. You'll notice this doesn't stand out terribly sharply, but it's good if you've got any little areas which have gone a little bit funky from maybe the highlights, so the shading rather didn't quite turn out the way you wanted. Just a little bit of this will help tidy that up. Now looking at him from behind, as you can see, white will be a sharper contrast, but I quite like that slightly more subtle finish. For the black stuff, we'll use a little bit of Dawnstone to highlight, and I'm probably not going to add very much of this at all, to be honest. Just at the corners of a few bits of equipment. Now for some reason, that step never takes as long as I think it will, and it looks really good once you're done. I'm going to go now for some white scar, and we'll do just a tiny wee bit of this on, well, the white details. You don't need to go overboard, just enough to brighten up the edges of them. Now for his skin, what I'm going to do is a little bit of Flayed One Flesh. This isn't actually much lighter than the color that's already under there, but it will help define some of the highlights that we want, like the bridge of his nose, his chin, and I'll do a little bit on his cheekbones, and along the backs of his hands as well. Now one thing that will always improve the look of a Guardsman is to put on the decals. It can seem like a bit of a faff, especially on so many miniatures, but I swear to you, it will be worth it. It always makes them look that much better. So I'm going to do that off screen because I have done a video detailing how to get the most out of these decals before. I'll link that one in the description. Now that looks a little better. With these two level shoulder pads, I like to put the number marking a little bit lower than I think most folks do. This would ordinarily be the center of those old style big Cadian single piece ones, so it looks to me like it's sitting in the right place on the arm. Matter of personal opinion, of course, you can put them wherever you like, but I do find it easier to start from that midpoint there. So what I'm going to do now is to apply a varnish. I'm going to use Instar's Varnish Plus, pop that on with a brush, and then add a couple of tufts just to finish off the base the way I like. Let's get a look at what it looks like when he's all finished. And there at last, our trooper of the 92nd Cadian Regiment is complete. Now, like I said at the beginning, this is a fair bit more work than some of the other Cadian colour schemes out there. It's very striking, and it's not actually difficult to do, it's just time-consuming. But I think the end result, if you're willing to put that in, is going to look smashing. They're a really cool-looking regiment. So, as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the wonderful patrons who keep me ticking in paints and glue, including my producers, Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Rod, Andrew, and Jimmy. Your support means the world, folks. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.